Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Powerful Perspectives. I would like to discuss a song with you today that I heard a little while ago and listened to again recently. I have a playlist of just different songs that I listen to on Sunday, like different kind of sacred music, religious music that I like to listen to on Sundays. And a couple weeks back I was listening to this song. I don't always know all of them super intimately, like I'm not really familiar with them. Sometimes I take different songs from different playlists, or I just kind of compile, or if I hear something that I like, then I'll add it. Even just kind of from hearing a little sound bite, maybe I haven't listened to it fully, but I'm interested in it, I like it, so I just kind of save it for later and I kind of put it in these playlists. And so, yeah, it happened with this song, and this song is called The Power of God by Alysse. And I'll put the link to it in the description as well, so that you can find it if you're interested. But I was listening to this song just kind of during one of my Sundays, I guess, a couple weeks back, and a line from this song really stuck out to me and really made me start thinking and kind of pondering about some things that I thought I would share with you here today. So the line goes like this. The lyricist or vocalist, the line that is sang says, "For how could we hope to see his face, who never could see his hand?" And so they're talking about, God, or about the Savior, or about a higher power. And yeah, this idea is like, so how could we hope to see his face who never could see his hand? And the idea is, it's a question of focus. It's a question of what we allow to be blessings in our lives. And I think this is really a powerful thought, a powerful perspective to consider, a powerful question to look into more critically. This question of the value and the importance and the credit that we assign to different things in our lives, how we choose to think about it, how we choose to internalize it. And I'll give just maybe a couple of examples that come to mind. Let's say that you're a student and you're preparing for a test that you are worried about, and you kind of go back over your notes, you review them, you study your notes, maybe you ask a friend or family member to kind of quiz you on some things, and you do what you can kind of to prepare, but you're still feeling nervous about it, and maybe you say a prayer, right? Maybe it's a vocal prayer, maybe it's just a prayer said in your mind, maybe you put words to it, maybe you don't, maybe it's just a hope and a desire that you express in your mind or in your heart, that you kind of send out into the universe, hoping for a little extra oomph, right? A little extra help in preparing for that test. And let's say that you write that test and you do well. Maybe you're surprised by it. Maybe you're pleasantly surprised by the result that you get back. And maybe some people that you share that result with, or people who hear the result that you got on your test, they say, "Oh, wow, like you did so good," right? And they congratulate you on your success. And you respond by saying, "Oh yeah, like I studied really hard, like I went over my notes, like I asked this person to quiz me, like I put in all of these different like efforts to get a good grade," right? And sometimes people will ask you, like when they see your success, they will often ask you, like, "What did you do? Like how did you prepare? How did you do so well?" And our tendency often, not always, not for everyone, but I think it's a pretty common tendency for the things that we remember most readily to be those things that we ourselves did. And that often tends to be the reason that we give for our success, or the credit, the direction we appoint that or point that credit towards, right, is often our own efforts. And how often do we stop and remember, oh, like, also among all those other things, like, I prayed for help, right? Often it kind of it gets left as an afterthought. It often gets left as an afterthought in those moments of success, when we are doing really well and when we have that success and that happiness and that joy. It tends to often get lost then. But even sometimes in the preparation, right? So often we tend to think of involving God as kind of a last resort. And again, I'm not speaking of everyone, but I'm speaking of a common tendency, and I don't think that it's by coincidence that does tend to be a tendency. I think Satan would want God to be our last resort if he comes up at all, right? I think it's genius of Satan, give credit where credit is due. Like, I think it's genius of Satan to try to get us to focus on doing everything ourselves first and only think of God as a last resort, if we think of him at all, right? Like exhaust all of our personal resources individually, but then like turn outward to other people, right? I'll give another example in a minute of this. But yeah, if you can get us to rely on ourselves and rely on others, to take scriptural terms, right, to rely on the arm of flesh, then he can get us to kind of cut God out of the picture, right? And it's effective in the sense that it cuts us off from recognizing blessings, right? The fact that you did so well on that exam, let's say, that could be considered, recognized, and appreciated and valued as a blessing, as a gift from heaven, as a gift from God. It could be seen that way. It could be internalized that way. It could be appreciated that way. It could be experienced that way, as a loving gift from a loving Heavenly Father. And yet, we kind of cheapen that experience or that opportunity by taking a little bit of that, well, sometimes a little bit of that credit, but taking that involvement out of the picture, right? And I don't mean to say that means that God isn't still there helping us. He may very well be, right? But I think he is much more able to be invested in our lives and in our experiences and contribute that much more actively and fully to them when he is invited to do so. And through that invitation, if we remember it, especially after the fact, when the dust settles and the clouds clear and we have those warm and bright moments of success and gratitude, I think it's important to turn that gratitude back to our Father in heaven, and allow him to be a part of that. It sweetens the experience when we do. Another example that I've noticed in my own life, when I get into situations where I am at wit's end, like I just get bombarded by life, by emotion, by stress, by difficult challenges that I don't really know how to face, questions that I don't really know how to engage with, paradoxes, especially when I have a choice, like a really strong, important, big choice, and I don't know how I feel about it. Because I could go either way, and I could feel arguably equally going either way, right? It's really hard for me to choose because I see the pros and the cons in each, and I value both of them somewhat equally, and I'm at wit's end for working through it mentally and emotionally, right? And knowing what to do about it or how to move forward. That's a very common example for me, but it doesn't have to be necessarily just like a decision with kind of equal combaters, let's say, or equal options. It could also just be a struggle or a question or some sort of challenge or situation or experience that just blindsides me, right? That just catches me off guard and I don't know how to react to it, and I'm just like flabbergasted and dumbfounded, and I'm just there like in shock, right? And all of us like react to these things differently. I tend to be a person who kind of freezes in those moments where I just like, because I need processing time. And often a lot of what I need to help with that processing is I need to like talk it through. I need to express the feelings and the thoughts that I have, and I need to get them out somehow so that they're out there, and then I can kind of see them or hear them and then kind of arrange them and make some sense of them, right? But my tendency in moments like this is to reach out to someone. Often it will be a family member or it will be one of my closest friends. And I have like a handful of people that I turn to with these, like in these times, with these moments. And it tends to be like the same handful of people, like the same few people that I just kind of always think of first and tend to go to, because they kind of act as rocks for me in my life. And I've asked myself this question, you know, at this time as well. Why do I immediately think of these other people? And this is not to say that that we shouldn't involve friends, family, loved ones, trusted, you know, trusted people in our lives to be there and to support us in difficult times, and that we can't invite them to be a part of that process. I'm not saying that we should completely like avoid or dismiss our support systems, right? That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am trying to do with myself, and maybe invite you to do as well, is to consider, like, why is the first person that I think of this person and not, for example, God, right? Or not myself. Like, oftentimes I think a lot of the motivation for why I turn to others is because I feel overwhelmed, and to a significant extent I'm trying to delegate some form of personal responsibility, whether that be personal responsibility to make a choice. Oftentimes it is a form of a choice. It could be a choice in terms of what to do or what not to do. But it can be a little bit more of a nuanced choice as well, in the sense of a choice of how to feel. Because oftentimes I will be feeling a paradox of emotions. I'll be feeling two or more emotions simultaneously that seem like they should be mutually exclusive. They'll be like opposite emotions as we think of them or tend to think of them. And so like that confuses me. It's hard for me to hold on to and tolerate those paradoxical emotions simultaneously, and to know what to do with them. It's something that I've worked on for a long time, and I'm still working on it. It's part of the reason that like on this channel I have a specific playlist titled Powerful Paradoxes, right? Because there is a power and there is a divinity in paradox. And I continue to learn that and try to understand it more and try to appreciate and value it more in my own life. But it's been a journey, it's been a challenge, and it's taken time, and I'm not super good at it yet. I still have a lot to learn. But I think part of the reason that I tend to reach out to these people is often because, yeah, I'm feeling these paradoxical energies in myself, and I want clarity, I want insight, oftentimes I want someone to tell me what to do. Tell me what to do or tell me what to feel, right? And when it comes down to it, that's not their decision to make. Part of me wants someone else to make the decision for me, because then I have a fall guy or a fall girl if it goes wrong, right? If I choose wrong, but it was because of someone else's suggestion or whatever, I can say, I got bad advice, right? And I can share the weight of that disappointment or that frustration with someone else. I don't have to carry that by myself. And so it's, in that case, or in that way, it seems easier sometimes to share that load and to share that responsibility with someone else. But what it does is it creates this cognitive dissonance, because at the end of the day, the decision is still your own. And you can ask someone else for their insights and their opinions on that decision, but the decision is still yours to make. And so, try as you might, you cannot fully and justifiably blame the other person or hold the other person accountable for that choice, because it wasn't their choice to make. That delegation, like that attempt at delegation of responsibility or accountability, we can delegate part of the choice, maybe, but we cannot successfully delegate the responsibility and the accountability for that choice. That remains with us. And so we're stuck in a really uncomfortable situation, because as much as we might want to be angry with that other person for how things went or didn't go, as a result of their insight and their encouragement or whatever, for those of us with a conscience, or those of us who are listening, there's a voice in the back of your head still that kind of doesn't let you fully feel justified in that assignment of responsibility, right? That outsourcing of responsibility, because it can't be done. It can't be done fully. There are those who will try to, sometimes pathologically, right? And I'm trained as a mental health therapist, and so like you meet with this, right? This is it's a phenomenon that is really tempting, and it can hold a really strong effect on people, right? But more often than not, it's accompanied with this cognitive conflict, right? This cognitive dissonance. Yeah, it's a little bit more rare that disappears, and if it does, that's even more troubling in some ways. But that's aside from the point. The point that I wanted to bring up with this example is that it's another example that illustrates to me that I look outward to other people to kind of delegate parts of this responsibility of choice, of feeling, of how I engage with what I'm faced with. And I kind of try to outsource that to other people. And I think a step above that would be outsourcing it to God, right? Because God is not going to give you bad advice. And so it might seem like it at times, right? And so we might come away from that experience and say, like, really, you told me to do this and things got harder rather than easier? And he'll be like, yeah, because that's what you needed to do to learn and grow from it, right? And that's ultimately what's going to make you a stronger, more advanced, more experienced, wiser person in the future, right? And the next time you get faced with a similar situation, you'll be that much better prepared for it. We don't always like the answers that we get from God. But at the end of the day, they're in our best interest. And so whether or not we believe or recognize them to be so, that's a different question. But the fact that they are so, that isn't as negotiable. Whereas with other people, it may be, because as individuals, we're imperfect and we give imperfect advice. But I think that attitude of wanting to outsource our decisions, outsource our responsibilities, our accountabilities, and kind of put that on God, that's still not the best approach, right? The best approach really is to take that responsibility for ourselves, wrestle with it, come up with our own ideas, and say, look, I've thought it through based on my current understanding and the current resources and insights, etc., that I have available to me. I think this is the best course of action. Do you agree? Or is there something that you can teach me? Is there something that I can learn, that you can show me? Can you show me a better way, right? That's just another example. There are many examples that we could give, right? When things happen in our lives. One thing that I will touch on here, and I'm going to get a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for here? A little bit controversial, maybe, but I want to talk about science. Science and religion have not always been the best of friends. In fact, there's been quite a bit of conflict between them throughout the years, decades. They're fighting against each other in some ways, in many ways, as epistemologies, right? So for those who are not so familiar with that word epistemology, epistemology just means a source of knowledge. It's a system for gaining knowledge and information and verifying truth. So it's like it's a perspective or a method of gaining knowledge and insight and truth. And so religion, and again, there's various different religions, right? There's Christian religions, Judeo-Christian religions, there's Islam, there's Taoism, there's Buddhism, there's so many different types of religion, right? And not all of them share the same form of epistemology. They don't all necessarily say that knowledge, insight, truth comes from the same place, right? There may be some overlap in different ways that we believe we have access to truth. There may be lots of similarities between different types of religions, but they still differ, right? But oftentimes there will be a form of higher power, right? And where that higher power resides, or what characteristics that higher power takes on, may differ. But oftentimes there's a form of higher power right? That acts as the source of knowledge and truth. Whereas in science, the method of receiving truth and knowledge comes through a system of testing and an observation. It's pattern recognition at the end of the day, right? And it's pattern recognition based in the often material, physical, observable world, right? You need to be able to observe and measure it. If you can't observe it or measure it, then based in scientific method, you don't really have a way of testing it and proving it, and you can't validate it scientifically. And so different ways of approaching knowledge, right? And there's something to be had from each, right? And we could argue, and I might have separate videos on this another time, about the place of faith and trust in science, because you do still have to operate on faith and trust to a certain extent within science as well. But that's perhaps another topic for another day. But science, in much of the world today, has kind of taken precedence and kind of stolen the presidential chair, let's say, as kind of the leading source of recognized or acknowledged or agreed upon knowledge and truth, right? Much of the modern world looks to science as kind of the source of truth, and as the correct method of coming to truth and understanding. It's not the only epistemology, the only method of inquiry and knowledge gaining and truth seeking that exists, but it is the one that kind of reigns supreme in our modern society. And I stop to wonder sometimes if that can also sometimes influence and cheapen our experiences with the world around us. Because of the increased knowledge and understanding that we have of how things work, right? We understand better through biology, let's say, how the human body works, how plant life works, right? How different organisms work, the structure that they operate in, right? And how they work. We have insight and understanding into these things through astronomy or not astrology so much. Again, that's another epistemology, right? Another way of looking at truth. But you look at like astronomy and physics and astrophysics especially, right? And we learn about how planets and stars and how the universe works in different ways, right? And we gain insight into different systems and different ways that things work. My chosen field, I chose to operate within psychology, right? To study and learn psychology, and that studies how humans work, how we as human beings think and behave and interact in different social environments. And there's a lot of insight that can come through observation and pattern recognition, and there's a lot of truth that we can get through that, right? But I wonder if sometimes the scientific method or the scientific structure in which we live our lives, if it sometimes can lead to some intellectual egoism or pride. If sometimes because we think that we understand things better, and in many ways we do, like we do gain insight into things more than we have had in the past, and that's a blessing. But I wonder if that sometimes takes the wonder out of it. If it takes the magic and miracle out of it, right? We think that because we can explain things using a certain system of understanding, and we can do so consistently, coherently for the most part, there are still lots of types of questions that we can't answer through science, right? Just because the subject matter isn't really tangible to science. This is a tricky thing in psychology, honestly, because, you know, psychology is based on human behavior and experience. Often, many elements of that are not observable, tangible, or measurable in the ways that we would like to have them in the scientific method. And so we have to alter some of our methodologies in our testing to try to accommodate that, right? And so, like, the methods aren't always perfect, and we try to change them a little bit, but we can't always do so completely accurately, right? But regardless, I think sometimes because we think we understand things and we can talk about them a certain way that makes sense, and we've developed a system in which it seems that a lot of things fit, perhaps even most things, and some might even say all things fit within that system of explaining how we attain knowledge, right? Or how things make sense within a certain framework of knowledge and information and truth. I think it can sometimes take some of the wonder out of it. It can sometimes take some of the awe out of it. Not always, right? There are tons of scientists who are in awe of their discoveries because they see things that shouldn't work but do. And they see things that do work according to like a certain structure and reliability, but it's almost too perfect to be left to chance. And so that becomes awe-inspiring, right? And there's many different types of experiences that can be had and that are had. But when it comes down to it, I think we have the choice. We have the choice to let God, or a higher power, however you want to call him, her, it's, whatever, but to let a higher power be present and contribute to our experiences, and to let that wonder and amazement and gratitude and like let that be a part of our experience, or to explain it away somehow, to use a different form of explanation, whether that be our own efforts, whether that be a system of understanding, scientific or otherwise, right? I think we have a choice. You know, sometimes I'll be going somewhere and I'll be in a hurry, and I'll be worried that I'm going to be late, and I will get a bunch of green lights or like white walking lights if I'm walking, you know, like I'll get like the crosswalk light changes like almost immediately as I go, right? And like the whole time, basically, as I'm going there, the path is just kind of opened for me and the lights change and I'm able to go unhindered. How do you explain that, right? Oh yeah, maybe it's just chance. Maybe I just happened to leave at the same time as all of these lights were changing and it just happened that way and just came together randomly. Sure, right? But could I choose to let that be a blessing? Could I choose to just say, you know what, like, maybe heaven helped me in some way, right? I couldn't make that all happen on my own. I didn't contribute to that. I didn't make those things happen, but they were beneficial to me, and I'm grateful for them. Can I not just let that be a blessing? Can I not let that be a miracle? I think the more we are willing to acknowledge certain things as being miraculous or being blessings, the more we are able to look for those qualities and see them in the things around us, rather than explaining them away some other way. I think we will notice a difference, and we will see more and more miracles because we've changed our perspective on them. We've changed what we look for and what qualities we subjectively assign to the experiences that we are having. The more we see his hand, the more we will see his face. Like I think divinity will make itself more and more manifest in our lives if we choose to recognize the divinity that is already in our lives, right? It will just grow and expand onto that foundation that we put in the effort to create and allow for ourselves. I put out a video maybe a couple weeks back about prayer, or just, well, about how I hear him, right? The idea is, how do I hear him? Like, how do I hear God? How do I hear divinity in my life? How do I recognize that in my own life, right? I think it's a question of attention and focus. And there's a lot of choice points in that. We get to decide where we will look for those influences. And I think it's the same here with blessings and miracles. We can choose where we see them by choosing how we will define them and internalize them and frame them within our lives. So I'll send I'll kind of put like a tag up here to that How Do I Hear Him video, so you can find it easily as well if you're interested. But let me know your thoughts and impressions and reflections. I'd love to hear your comments below, and I will see you next time.